Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Cabinet meeting of Shropshire Council. I am obliged to read out this message before we start. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public are able to hear and view the papers displayed during the broadcast of the meeting. This meeting is being held using remote technology, and should any Cabinet members experience technical difficulties during the meeting, they should immediately contact the telephone number previously given. Councillors are requested to mute their microphones unless asked to speak. The chat function may be used to indicate the desire to speak. As leader, I will interpret the Council's existing standing orders in light of the requirements of a remote participation, with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making a ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the Cabinet to confirm their presence and any interests. I will ask everyone that speaks during the meeting, including members of Cabinet, group leaders or officers, to introduce themselves before they speak. So we move to item 1. Item 1 is apologies, and the apologies we have are from Councillor Robert Macy. Robert's wife had a baby boy on Friday, and his job today is to take them home from hospital. So he's got a good excuse for not being here, and we wish them both well for the future. Amanda, have you any other apologies?
No other apologies, Leader.
OK, thank you. Now I will do a roll call. Can everyone just confirm they haven't any pecuniary interests as we go through the list? So I'll start with Councillor Gwilym Butler.
No interest, Chair, thank you.
Right, Lee Chapman, Councillor Lee Chapman. You present, Lee? No, can't hear from Lee at the moment. Go Steve Charmley, Councillor Steve Charmley.
Yeah, I'm here, Leader, and no interest to declare.
OK, Councillor Dean Carroll.
Present, Leader, and no interest to declare.
Councillor Steve Davenport.
No interest to declare.
Councillor David Minery.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Leslie Picton.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Ed Potter.
I'm here and nothing to declare.
Right. I'm still looking for Lee Chapman. Lee, are you around? No, all quiet there. Right. Other than that, group leaders, can I ask if Councillor Roger Evans is present?
Present and listening.
And no interests.
Sorry, and no interest to declare.
Councillor Alan Mosley. No. Councillor Pauline D.
Yes, Leader, I'm here and no interest.
Right. There are other members intending to ask questions. Councillor David Turner, are you present?
Yes, I am, Leader.
Councillor David Vasmer.
Yes, I'm present.
Councillor Brian Williams.
Yes, present.
And Councillor Rob Gittins.
Yes, Leader, I'm present.
And for the information of members of the public, officers who should be present, Karen Bradshaw.
Present, Leader, thank you.
And Andy Begley.
Yes, present, thank you.
They're both the interim chief executives. And then we move on to Mark Barrow, Executive Director of Place. Mark, are you present?
Present, Leader.
Thank you. And then Director of Finance, James Walton. James, are you here?
Yes, present.
Right. Director of Workforce and Transformation, Michelle Leith. Are you around, Michelle?
I am, Leader.
Thank you. Director of Legal and Democratic Services, Claire Porter.
Yes, present.
And the committee officer is Amanda Hollyoak.
Yes, present.
Right, I think that's all that here. But anybody else, if they speak, can they make sure they introduce themselves as they start? Right, item 3, the minutes. I move that the minutes of the previous Cabinet meeting held on the 29th of April 2020 as circulated with the agenda papers, be signed as a correct record. I'm happy to move that, and I'm going to ask for a seconder, which I'm hoping will be Councillor Steve Chalmley.
Yeah, happy to second, Leader.
Okay. Any comments from anybody? No, all seems quiet. So I now accept these minutes as the record unless anyone indicates differently, which they haven't. So those will be accepted as a true record. Item 4, public questions. In accordance with Procedure Rule 14, we will now deal with the questions from members of the public. These are the revised procedure rules. I'm going to ask the Director of Legal and Democratic Services to read out questions received from members of the public. So, Claire Porter. Claire, can I ask you to start with the public questions?
Yes, Leader. The first question is from Mr. Rob Wilson, and his question is, I welcome the announcements made in the media to limit traffic in our town centres to allow them to reopen whilst allowing shoppers to maintain social distancing. However, this does not enable people of all ages and abilities to use walking and cycling to travel to the town centres. What is Shropshire Council doing to maintain the increased levels of walking and cycling in our community streets? Specifically, rapidly implementing the government's policy of low traffic neighbourhoods. What is Shropshire Council doing to enable people to make walking and cycling their prime modes of transport into our town centres from the surrounding suburbs, especially installing protected cycle lanes along arterial routes? Why is Shropshire Council not consulting widely with the public to identify where the impediments to walking and cycling are in our local communities by using a free online application such as Commonplace?
Thank you, Claire. I'm now going to ask Councillor Steve Davenport to respond. Steve?
Shropshire Council is working across all market towns to support social distancing, public safety, walking and cycling agenda. Plans are already being developed to support town centres via cycle routes, one-way systems, temporary widening of footpaths or temporary road closures that will allow safer walking and cycling. Further decisions that the out-of-town car parks will remain free of charge in June. All car parks have been free since March, will hopefully incentivise use of these car parks to support in reducing car usage direct into the towns. This work is being developed and numerous visits to towns have been undertaken with local representatives, business improvement districts, Chamber of Commerce to develop these plans. As this work grows, these plans will be available on the council website with a developing action plan. The council is and has to work at pace on the innovative guidance from government being received basically on a daily basis. This has been translated into action on the ground, and it has been in the last week that direct funding from the government to support this initiative was received. That said, the council has already begun to plan and act on this agenda. The government's decision to announce that the 15th of June will allow more retail businesses to open is permanent. The initial work to make town centres safe, to encourage footfall and support the local economy of Shropshire is the key to focus of this work. Once the initial make safe response has been undertaken, then longer term plans derived from a more considered and consulted response can be publicised. Thus, please be assured that long-term opportunity to improve the town centres and visitors' experience is not lost. However, the immediate response is to make safe and encourage use and viability of the longevity in our county towns.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Right, we move on to question 2. So can I ask Claire Porter again to read out question 2? Claire.
Yes, before I do that, Leader, I have seen a message from Councillor Lee Chapman. He was having problems connecting, so I'm not sure if he has connected now.
Okay. We'll
ask him. I'm hoping to be here now.
And can you confirm you've got no interests?
I've got no interest and I'm present at the meeting. Thank you.
OK, thank you. So back to Claire. Claire Porter.
Thank you. This is a question from Mr. Peter Welsh. I have a question regarding the decision to forge ahead with the North West Relief Road. I do not support the building of this road for a number of reasons, and I'm asking the council to respond to my concerns. Number one, building new roads brings more traffic into areas, not less. This has been shown to be the case in many studies. Therefore, this road will increase the county's pollution levels, not decrease them, especially as Shropshire is already one of the highest CO2 emitting counties in the country. Number two, if the main aim is to reduce pollution within Shrewsbury, then there are many other solutions. Car-free pedestrian areas, 20 miles per hour limits throughout, improved park and ride facilities. Why aren't these and other solutions being promoted? Question 3. I do not live in Shrewsbury, but where I live has seen a 50% cut in bus services in the last year, and my area is not the only one to have suffered in this way. This directly increases the traffic throughout Shropshire and adds to pollution levels. Money needs to be spent on public transport, electrifying the fleet, rather than on projects such as road building, which themselves add more carbon to the atmosphere and then still more through the increasing number of cars. Number 4. One thing the current pandemic has demonstrated is that we need to stop abusing and destroying the natural environment. Road building cuts down trees and destroys existing natural habitats. It is not enough to say that trees will be replanted. It takes years for trees to reach maturity and be able to sequester the amount of carbon that the lost mature trees were able to absorb.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to invite Councillor Dean Carroll to respond. Dean?
Thank you for the question. It is rather a long question, so hence the answer is also rather long, so I hope you'll bear with me. In answer to the first part of your question, traffic between areas to the north and west of Shrewsbury has to pass through the town centre, run through unsustainable routes west of the town, or take the significantly longer route around the A5, A49 bypass. As a result, there are unacceptably high levels of traffic, including heavy vehicles, on residential roads approaching the town centre and within the town centre itself, where there is only limited highway capacity. This leads to problems of congestion, delays and journey unreliability for road users, and problems of noise, poor air quality, emissions and reduced accessibility. Public transport services are also affected by congestion. The North West Relief Road is intended to support the specific objectives for Shrewsbury. To improve connectivity and accessibility between the north and west of Shrewsbury for all modes of transport. 2, to reduce traffic congestion in Shrewsbury town centre. 3, to reduce traffic congestion on the A5, A49 bypass. 4, to reduce traffic congestion on the north and west approaches to the town. 5, to improve the reliability of journey times and reduce unforeseen delays. 6, to improve the efficiency of Shrewsbury's transport network for all modes of transport. 7, to improve the resilience of Shrewsbury's transport network. 8, to reduce the number of people killed or seriously injured on roads in Shrewsbury. 9, to improve air quality, especially in the built-up areas of Shrewsbury. 10, to reduce net emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases from vehicles using the highway network. 11, to facilitate the Shrewsbury West Sustainable Urban Extension. 12, to enhance the benefits of Shrewsbury Integrated Transport Package. And 13, to support Shrewsbury's Big Town Plan. Coming on now to the second question. Alternatives to building a relief road have been considered, including improvements to bus services, improvements to park and ride, improvements to the walking and cycling networks and demand management, such as road pricing. However, the results showed that these means alone would not produce the benefits equal to those which would be achieved by building the North West Relief Road. This does not mean, of course, that these measures cannot be considered as part of the wider measures within the town, over and above the delivery of the North West Relief Road, against the backdrop of reductions in traffic on completion of the road. Alternative routes for the relief road have also been considered before the council made its selection of the preferred route. In answer to your third question, public transport is a key part of sustainable transport solutions, and this has been underlined by the Council's continued financial support for public transport, despite the significant financial challenges that it has faced. The Department for Transport recently announced a number of funding initiatives for which the Council are currently drawing up expressions of interest to enhance the Shropshire public transport network. These include funding for electrifying the Shrewsbury bus fleet and the wider Shropshire bus network, where appropriate, funding to provide rural mobility transport solutions to reduce the need for longer journeys, providing for greater access to local services. And we were recently successful in our initial bid for funding to enhance part of the current public transport network to encourage passenger growth. In addition, we are currently in the process of drafting a new park and ride strategy for Shrewsbury, which will provide for a next generational transport system, complementing active travel within the town, whilst at the same time the council are also exploring opportunities to electrify their own vehicle fleet and provide greater opportunities for staff to access alternative fuel technology for work and personal use. Finally, coming on to your last question, an environmental impact assessment in accordance with the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations of 2017 as amended is being compiled. This will accompany the planning application and will focus on the following pertinent points. It will set the legal framework. It will document the consultation progress. It will consider the alternatives to the proposed scheme, establish the baseline environmental conditions at the site and within the surrounding area. It will identify likely significant effects during the design process so that some effects can be avoided, prevented, reduced, or if possible, offset prior to the assessments within the environmental study. Identify potential impacts associated with the proposed scheme in relation to the following topics: air quality, agriculture and soil resources, biodiversity, climate change, geology and soils, historic environment, landscape and visual elements, major accidents and disasters, materials and waste, noise and vibration, population and health, and road drainage and water environment. It will also identify suitable essential mitigation measures to avoid, prevent, reduce, or if possible offset the identified potential impacts on the environment and identify the likely significant residual effects following the implementation of these measures. It will identify monitoring measures where likely significant residual effects are identified, and it will identify, predict and qualitatively assess the cumulative effects of the proposed scheme, including those associated with the other identified committed developments and those associated with the interaction between the above mentioned environmental topics. The scope of the EIA, that's the Environmental Impact Assessment, has been determined through consultation with statutory and non-statutory environmental bodies during the EIA scoping stage, and full details can be found on our website, and a link to that will be provided in the written version of this response and posted onto the council's website when this goes into the minutes.
Okay, thank you, Dean. That's the end of item 4, which is the public questions. So we now move to item 5, which is questions from members of the council. And the first question is from Councillor Dan Morris, who I think is unable to be here. So I'm going to ask Claire Porter if she can read out Councillor Dan Morris's question. Claire.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, this is from Councillor Dan Morris. At the full council meeting on the 19th of December 2019, Shropshire Council unanimously passed my motion to support the principle of a 20 miles per hour speed limit outside all schools in the county, and asked officers to bring a report to council within 6 months to consider how this could be implemented. In addition, the government has recently announced a national £2 billion package to look at creating a new era for cycling and walking. It strikes me that both schemes, one instigated by Shropshire Council and one instigated by national government, could be complementary to each other. Please could the portfolio holder for highways and transport report on how the council will look to implement the scheme for 20 miles per hour limits outside schools, and what the council's plans are to help create a new era for cycling and walking in Shropshire.
Thank you, Claire. I'm now going to ask Councillor Steve Davenport to respond. Steve.
Okay, in answer to Councillor Morris's question in regards to Condover and the wider county, work in highways and transport colleagues and colleagues in education to bring forward a proposal for assessing, where appropriate, implementing 20-mile-an-hour speed restrictions outside of schools. Our report to full council is being prepared and scheduled for September's council meeting. The report will bring forward the methodology, timetable and funding regime for the council to consider. Councillor Morris is correct that the government has released guidance for local authorities on managing their road networks in response to COVID-19 pandemic and has made funding available to encourage more people to choose alternative ways of travel. When they need to, there is a focus on walking, cycling to relieve demand on public transport, and it is hoped that this will promote healthier habits long term, including for the journey to school. In consideration is also to be given to how social distancing requirements can be accommodated at key points on the network and in our town centres. Shropshire Council has prioritised a team to consider appropriate measures, hence the demand a full report to full council. Measures could include temporary one-way streets, road closures, speed restrictions, new information signs. Work will also be carried out on bus operators in advance of any projected areas in demand and the pandemic move through the future phases. Recent press releases have demonstrated continuing work with Shropshire businesses, improvement districts, town councils to develop a package of temporary measures. Highways and Transport are working close with the colleagues in economic growth to provide support in our town centres. Guidance is being received from a daily basis from the government on this issue. It should be also noted that at the time of preparing this response, no notification of receipt of financial support to this implemented initiatives has been received from the government. Officers are taking the relevant government departments to seek the necessary detail required. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Right, we move on to question 2, which is from Councillor David Turner. I think David's present. So, David, would you like to put your question, please?
Thank you, Leader. This is Councillor David Turner, representing Much Wenlock. My question is, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on how we conduct our lives. Individuals and families have adjusted the way they live, work and shop. It is the latter point I wish to address. There has been a lot of media focus on the large footprint retailers such as supermarkets who have adjusted their retail offer, and on other multiple retailers and hospitality businesses which have been forced to close for the duration. In Shropshire, we've heard plenty about Shrewsbury and the larger market towns, but it's the smaller ones which attract my question. Whilst food shops and some pubs and cafes have adapted their business model to not only meet customer needs through home delivery, etc., but also to ensure their survival as the lockdown eases, other traders in our towns and villages will make a standing start when they're permitted to reopen. Some who have had an online offer may have been able to mitigate the impact to an extent. Hotels and specialist retailers, however, mostly have not had that opportunity. Shropshire Council has withdrawn off-street parking charges during this crisis, but in my experience, there have been very few vehicles using them because of the reduction in economic activity to a snail's pace. What steps is Cabinet taking now, through the groundwork of appropriate specialist officers, to ensure when some degree of normality resumes in small high streets, that we attract visitors to our small market towns and welcome them, thus stimulating the local economy and getting folk back to the previous employment levels? And I would just say that I submitted this question nearly 3 weeks ago, and since then I appreciate much has changed, and I nonetheless look forward to the portfolio holders' rather more up-to-date response.
Okay, thank you, David. I'm going to ask Councillor Steve Charmley to respond. Steve.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the question, David. Shropshire Council has been working collectively across departments and with external partners supporting the resilience of our market towns, businesses and communities. We've been able so far to support 5,916 businesses, including retail and leisure business across the county, with grants between £10,000 and £25,000. This has seen over £70 million in grants paid to eligible businesses to date, of which £24.44 million to those in retail, hospitality and leisure sector specifically. We have on the 27th of May launched extension funding for small businesses, which will be focused on a number of priority types of business that could not access these first grants, including market traders, B&B, who do not have the business rated property, but which are particularly applicable to our market towns and smaller villages. We're going to be making available £20,000 over the next few weeks as a competitive fund for projects aimed at encouraging footfall and campaigns to support people back into our towns and destinations to use businesses, shops and spend money to support the local economy. More details on this will follow in the coming days. Supporting the towns to be resilient is critical, and our officers from across departments have been, sorry, my screen's just changed. Across departments have been working collectively to support this. We've been undertaking reviews of town centres to ensure we can support them to open safely. Public health and safety remains at the centre of these efforts. Measures include changes to movement flows, the routes to allow for social distancing to be achieved, supporting businesses to be in place, changes to reopening and clear messaging and communications. Highways are continuing to review car parks to ensure the safety of users while supporting the businesses and traders. Car parks have been free of charge during the lockdown period, and as of June the 1st, car parks outside the immediate town centres, as of June the 1st, car parks of immediate town centres will remain free of charge until July. Work to improve and refresh car parks is being undertaken, and this programme is a priority for the county-wide work will be almost completed. As a council, we have allowed car parks to be used to support some local trading, and the near future will be a key part of supporting social distancing. For example, supporting wider footpaths. Numerous guidance documents are being received daily from government, from public transport to cycling and social distancing. It's a key priority to support Shropshire towns and their economy. Working with local groups, organisations and town councils, we will support innovative ideas and approaches to trialling new ways and opportunities, including more pedestrian priority, cycling, pop-up green space, as well as looking at local marketing campaigns to support the economy, including tourism and visitors, by ensuring a safe environment. We are undertaking a lot of research and analysis of data to monitor unemployment, business change, poverty and other economic impacts, and working closely with partners including the LEP and Midlands Engine to collectively pool our resources and information to ensure we can access funding and target the right areas for intervention. There will be 2 dedicated task forces moving forward to enable the council to develop and focus on its economic and social recovery plans, with cabinet members, local experts and representatives from council's partner organisations included. All of our towns and high streets are important and key to the social fabric and economy, and we need to do all we can to give residents, visitors and businesses the confidence to return safely. This will mean there are limits to activities, controls will need to be in place, and we know recovery will take some time. We will continue to work closely with town and parish councils to coordinate this effort and the response to COVID-19. That's your answer, David. Thank you.
I have a supplementary question, Leader.
I think you're on mute, Leader.
Sorry, I tell everybody else off about that and I forget myself. Right. Okay, David.
I have a supplementary question, Leader. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is David Turner. Thank you, Steve, for that very extensive response. And I do hope you can send me a copy of it because I wasn't able to make a note of everything that you said. And I welcome many aspects of it, including the promotion of local of small high streets. Since I wrote that, the small towns have had a number of things to challenge them, and certainly in the case of Church Stretton and Much Wenlock, we have got rather more activity than we were hoping for, because both towns have been deluged with visitors from afar, and I am very concerned now that the people coming from as far away as Manchester and Hereford, who we would normally welcome in small numbers, are turning up with a flagrant disregard for social distancing, and as a result we've got a town which is covered in litter and drugs paraphernalia, and the ambulance is a regular visitor. So there is rather more that needs to be done. I was interested when you spoke about public health and safety, because we certainly don't want these small market towns to be coronavirus hotspots as a result of the disregard for the government guidance. So can we please, Steve, have some further support in terms of advice to retailers who, when they're confronted with people storming their shops, are in some difficulty. This is food retailers are in some difficulty in controlling them, and I'd appreciate any advice that can be given in that respect.
Okay, thank you, David. Over to Steve Charmley again. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yes, David. Everything you say makes perfect sense, and it is reciprocated, obviously, in the bigger and the smaller market towns across the county. And we'll be working with them, as I said in the original question, to ensure that this happens, and of course keeping local members in the loop with the communications as well.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We move on to question 3. This is from Councillor Les Winwood on behalf of the Bridgnorth councillors. Les can't be here, so can I ask Claire Porter to read out the question? Claire?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, the other Bridgnorth councillors are Elliot Lynch, William Parr and Christian Lee. And their question is, car parking can be a real challenge in Bridgnorth, and there have been discussions of a possible multi-storey car park on Inage Lane Car Park, Bridgnorth. This would help to deal with our desperate car parking shortage and benefit the town greatly. Could we have an update on progress, please?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Steve Davenport to respond. Steve.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for the question. There are competing proposals for possible significant housing developments at Tasley and Stanmore as part of the emerging local plan review. The council are currently considering an officer recommendation on the preference of site. This will be subject to a cabinet discussion on the 6th of July and then public consultation. Whichever option is preferred and accepted, there will be impact. This will be an impact on Bridgnorth in respect of transport and movement. In light of this, it's wise to consider the current potential impacts upon the town in respect of transport and movement. Undoubtedly, there is need to consider a mixture of opportunities to address these concerns, including park and ride, public transport provision, as well as any potential for future development and provision of capacity for car parking. As part of this work, developing a rationale that would inform a proposition for transport balancing car park transport use would prove a more comprehensive, sustainable approach. Part of this is being developed via the approved car parking strategy. Other considerations support such as possible reconfiguration of car parks or possible additional provision of car park provision are ongoing. Thus, preparation work with colleagues from estates and discussions with planning colleagues are scheduled to identify an approach to land and feasibility, as well as discussions with the wider market on such projects. Transport staff are sourcing currently available usage data. The data would be to utilize data to formalise an approach over the summer for considerations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We move on to question 4 from Councillor David Vasmer. I think David's in attendance. David?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'd just like to say that I put this question in some time ago and you have responded subsequently, but I will put the question now. Why are officers considering the sale of the former training centre on Racecourse Crescent with a large section of the car park for Monkmoor Rec, which is used on a regular basis by people using the football pitches, the all-weather pitches, the tennis courts, a bowling green and a croquet lawn for practices, training and matches? On Saturdays, the car park is full to overflowing. I'm already receiving complaints from nearby residents about people using the rec and parking on Racecourse Crescent. Since taking over the rec from Shropshire about 8 years ago, it has been transformed by better management and investments by the Lawn Tennis Association and Town Council, who recently renewed the all-weather pitch and its lighting. So why has the county refused to transfer ownership to the Town Council? Is the county so keen to gain income from its assets it's willing to sell land and thereby undermine the success of a recreational facility used by people from all over Shrewsbury and beyond, and seriously inconvenience residents living in nearby streets? Or will the council adopt a policy of not selling the land that is currently used, directly or indirectly, for recreation?
Thank you, David. I'm going to ask Councillor Steve Charmley to respond. Steve.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, David, for the question. The site in question has been promoted as a sustainable location for new housing within this area of the town, in close proximity to local shops and services and with good access to public transport and local pedestrian routes. An outline planning application has been prepared by the council to establish the principle of residential use of the site alongside the recreation ground and amenities. Informal discussions have taken place with officers of Shrewsbury Town Council, and it was agreed that the matter will be progressed by consulting with Highways Development Management colleagues on the appropriate form of access and the parking requirements for the recreation ground, as this is a key consideration for the venue and also for local residents. Officers will work with you, Councillor Vasmer, as local member, and with the Town Council to bring forward a proposal which delivers further enhancements and improved visual identity for the access to and from the recreation ground. Further work is planned to review the opportunities and other sustainable methods of travel to and from the facility.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We move on to question 5 from Councillor Brian Williams. Brian.
Thank you, Leader. This is Councillor Brian Williams from the Mears Division. My question is to the Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Councillor Ed Potter, in relation to the ability of schools to reopen from today, of which I have 3 good ones at Middle, Cockshut and Welshampton. Could Councillor Potter explain what action, if any, might be taken against parents who might be reluctant to send children back to school? And also, what action in respect of any LA maintained school that delays or resists reopening? How confident is Councillor Potter that all Shropshire schools will have begun the process of reopening by July the 17th? Over to you, Ed.
Thank you.
Ed,
thank you.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Go on, Councillor Ed Potter.
It's Ed Potter here, just responding to Councillor Williams's question. I think it's important to note that no action will be taken against parents in relation to returning the children to school in the summer term. The government guidance is clear on these issues and is indicated in the frequently asked questions which we have published on the Shropshire Council website. Some of this guidance includes: is attendance compulsory? Eligible children, including priority groups, are strongly encouraged to attend their education setting unless they are self-isolating or they are clinically vulnerable. No one with symptoms should attend a setting for any reason. If someone in their household is extremely clinically vulnerable, children should not attend if stringent social distancing can be adhered to and the child is able to understand following those instructions. Families should notify their nursery, school or college as normal if their child is unable to attend, so that staff can explore the reasons with them and address barriers together. Parents will not be fined for non-attendance at this time. Frequently asked question 7.2 also offers further guidance. Will parents be penalised if their child does not attend school? Parents will not be penalised if their child does not attend school. We expect schools and other relevant partners to work with and support the relevant families and pupils to return to school. This information is taken from the gov.uk website. It is also important to note that that on average around 80% of Shropshire schools have been open since lockdown commenced on the 23rd of March of this year for vulnerable children and those of critical workers. The decision when to reopen for further age groups will be taken by schools individually based on detailed risk assessments, which will determine when it is safe and practice to do so. In a number of cases, schools will need to plan for a phased reintegration, particularly where the school building places restrictions on the number of staff and pupils that can be accommodated safely, and or the school is faced with shortages of staffing through self-isolation, shielding or other constraints of staff returning to school. I am confident that all Shropshire schools will have begun the process of extending provision to the specified year groups by the end of the summer term, providing that there are no barriers to doing so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ed.
I have a supplementary question, Leader.
Go on then, quickly.
To Ed. Will he give consideration to the problems which will arise if schools can fully resume in September, when children who have been well schooled at home will be joined in class by others whose home circumstances may not have allowed for any significant schooling at all? How will the latter group be brought up to speed without holding the homeschooled children back? Okay. Over to you, Ed.
Right, Ed.
Thank you very much. Ed Potter here. On your supplementary question, I think it's important to note that in Shropshire we have a very high percentage of good and outstanding schools and a very dedicated teaching and support staff who support our young people throughout their education. Council officers in the education team will work closely with schools, with heads, with parents, families to support schools wherever possible to ensure that those children that may have been disadvantaged during the lockdown will have the resources they need, working with schools to ensure that they're able to catch up once schools fully reopen, whenever that may be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you both. Right, we move on to question 6, which is from Councillor Rob Gittins. I think Rob's around. Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. This is Councillor Rob Gittins, representing Cheswardine, Charles Arkle, Hinstock and Sutton-upon-Tern. My question is, Crow Lane, which runs from Charles Arkle to Ollerton Business Park, is in desperate need of a vehicle weight restriction and signage scheme limiting all traffic to under 7.5 tonnes. Could I ask the portfolio holder for highways to provide a timescale for the completion of this work, please?
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Steve Davenport to respond. Steve?
Hi, Rob. In response to your question, as Highways Authority, we receive numerous requests for schemes across the county. These schemes are assessed and prioritised in respect of support from local town councils or parish councils, police concerns and data from accidents, near misses and availability of resources. Hence, we will consider the request and assess this scheme is identified to be included or not in the future programme against other competing requests and fundings available. As soon as the initial assessment has been undertaken, Councillor Gittins will be updated directly. Thank you.
OK, thank you very much. Right, that's the end of item 5. So we move to item 6, which is scrutiny items. And I'm going to invite Councillor Claire Wild, Chair of the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee, to introduce the report of the Signs, Boards and Banners Task and Finish Group. Claire?
Good afternoon, Leader. Yes, if I can say a few words before. Obviously, when this report was done, we were in totally different times than we are now. The group did a fantastic report, spent lots of time, lots of effort, but obviously now I think, as I say, we're in a totally different place. So the recommendation really from the scrutiny committee was for you to note the report and to pass it over to the portfolio holder for another time. And I think the chair of the task and finish group was actually suggesting perhaps 12 months. So I will leave it for Joyce, if she wants to speak, to make a few comments about that particular bit.
Okay, right. Now, Councillor Joyce Barrow chaired the group, the task and finish group. So, Joyce, would you like to speak now?
Yes, please, Chairman. I think at the time it was a very good piece of work, and I actually think there is one portion that could go ahead quite easily, which is increasing costs for housing development signs. I think it's something that the council have missed and could bring in a considerable amount of money. I think that should be looked at, though I didn't bring that up when we had the performance management scrutiny meeting. As Claire said, time has moved on. It was pre-coronavirus when the meetings took place. And I think everyone felt economically where businesses are at the moment, it would be totally unfair and devastating actually for some of these companies and businesses to actually take on board the costs that we're proposing here. I would like to see it delayed by 12 months. I'll be interested to hear what the portfolio holder says, or even longer. I think it needs looking at in more depth now. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I'm going to invite the portfolio holder for Communities, Place Planning and Regulatory Services, which is Councillor Gwilym Butler, to respond. So, Gwilym.
Thank you, Chair. Gwilym Butler here. I'd like to thank both Joyce and Claire for the information they put in there and how relevant their narratives were. In respect of the recommendations, for myself, taking the A boards out of the recommendations, and I'll talk about those shortly, I think the rest of the recommendations could actually proceed. Talking about the A boards, this was pre-COVID. It's obvious that there are different issues in Shrewsbury and Oswestry, especially and to the other market towns. There's also major issues on the cost implications, which we haven't bottomed out, of actually having a scheme. And what those cost implications would be in relation to multinationals such as Marks and Spencer's against small businesses of 500 square feet who may trade up a guinnel. I also think we need to have a policy that is not a one-size-fits-all, that different parts of Shropshire can bring in what they need around the market towns. I agree with Joyce, we need to put this on the back burner. We need to understand what the new normal is going to be in our high streets, because that is crucial. I would like to congratulate the officers and regulatory services, because not just looking at this, they are doing an awful lot of work and guidance with retailers and staff about social distancing, and perhaps talk about that a bit later on. So there is an awful lot going on behind the scenes, but as I say, I'll accept the recommendations apart from the A boards, which we will have to discover once we are post the pandemic. I won't put a timescale on it, Joyce, because I think none of us have got a crystal ball in case we have another surge. You know, but I will, economic development, working with regulatory services, are going around all the market towns to try and get those businesses up and running, to try and get the footfall back on the high street safely. And that is my main concern at the moment. And as a council, we fully support businesses wherever we can. Thank you.
Right, now, next on my list, I've got Councillor Roger Evans who wishes to speak. So, Councillor Roger Evans.
Thank you, Peter. Can I support what Gwilym was saying? Time has gone on since it was last looked at, and it's the A boards which I wanted to speak of, and I welcome Gwilym's comments about it, that we do need to look at it again in 12 months, 18 months, whenever, because to put those costs on small businesses, especially, and those which live down the small alleys and all in all their different areas, and also the small village shops at the side of the roads, advertising what they have, in their shops. I think it does need to be looked at again, especially in the present crisis and the after effects that we will all be looking at how we can help those businesses. So thank you, Gwilym.
Okay, now Councillor Steve Chalmley has also asked a comment. So Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It's probably been covered now, but just from an economic point of view, you know, we need to help these businesses get back on their feet, and you know, by imposing more restrictions on them, as Gwilym has said, it's the last thing we need at the moment. So would welcome it being looked at again, you know, post-COVID in the new world.
All right, now I'm going to go back to Councillor Joyce Barrow. So Joyce.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. One of the reasons we actually met was because we wanted to charge more money for A boards and recoup losses over the years. I think one of the really important things that came out of the task and finish group is no councillors had any appetite for charging for things that we hadn't charged before, because we should have had higher fees than we were actually. It's very important.
Okay, now Claire Wild would also like to comment further. So Councillor Claire Wild. Oh,
Hello.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm back. I just went blank then. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, if I can just finish. And I think it's vitally important that when Gwilym does look at this again and brings it back to Cabinet, that we are still not trying to recoup any charges. I think businesses need to know that we're not going to do that, and we're going to take it from whenever the new fees are sorted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next, Councillor Claire Wild. Claire?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I just wanted to be crystal clear. The recommendation from performance management scrutiny was for Cabinet to actually note the report and send the report off with the portfolio holder for some time in the future. That's all the recommendation was. There was nothing said about A boards or anything. Okay, thank you.
Right. So I'll go back to Gwilym Butler, Councillor Gwilym Butler. So, so can we be clear that you're accepting the item back, you'll deal with it, but you want to talk separately about A boards. So do you need to say anything more about A boards now?
No, I think it's already been covered, Leader. I think we're all in the same ballpark with this. And I think moving forward, as the recommendations actually state, anything that we do will be cost neutral to businesses. You know, we will only recover our costs. But I will just add, you know, that I fully support businesses throughout this county, but we have to be cost neutral. Alternatively, the council taxpayer is supporting it. So we just need to be aware of that. And in light of the economic environment we're going to, there's going to be a lot of those council taxpayers who are also going to be suffering. So we just need to be aware of covering our costs. Thank you.
Councillor Alan Mosley has indicated he wishes to speak. So Alan.
Just a couple of points, actually. I mean, there was an important clause within the recommendations that quite significant, not powers, but quite significant influence should be given to the actual town and parish councils where the proposals were to be implemented, and they were going to recommend. So it was a devolved system that was proposed. And in terms of charges, it seems to me that it's no use having rules and regulations about the A boards, particularly without enforcing them at times. And so the charges were designed to pay for that increased enforcement, and there would be some increases in charges as a consequence.
So just so I'm clear, Alan, you're saying we should be charging more?
I'm saying that the charges that were being envisaged for the A boards were to enable some increased enforcement to ensure that the regulations were actually taking hold.
Okay, right, now I think we've probably said enough, but I'm just going to confirm with Gwilym that he's accepting the report, and he will come back at a later date with some responses on A boards and any item that needs clarifying. Are we all right with that, Gwilym?
Yeah, I agree. A boards need to be bottomed out in every town across this county how they work. I endorse what Alan's saying about town and parish councils, but the initial conversation were about waivers, how town and parish councils may want to change the policy locally. At this stage, there was no option for town councils to opt out of the policy should they not want it. So again, more work to be done. Leave it with us, and in the new world we're moving into, we will look at all angles and bring it back to you. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all we need to say on that item. So we will now move on to item 7, which is the West Midlands Design Charter. And I'm back to Councillor Gwilym Butler, who was the portfolio holder for Communities, Place Planning and Regulatory Services. So can you explain the purpose of this item, please?
Thank you, Leader. Again, this is quite straightforward. It was undertaken by officers from this council who are involved on the West Midlands scene in developing the charter. It's very straightforward, and I think it's very important from someone who's sat on planning committees in the past. We're often getting that from members and the public that we don't do enough with our style and design and our facts that we are caretakers of this great county, and we need to make sure that we have joined up thinking of how we develop in the future. For me, on the report, item 5.9, which are the 12 principles based around the 6 themes, really sum it up. It leads very nicely into our corporate strategy as well. I can't see that this will be controversial, and I'm happy to just remove the recommendation that Cabinet endorses the design charter. Thank you.
Right, can I ask Councillor Dean Carroll to second this? Dean?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I happily second this. I think it's a very positive step. I was involved in some of the initial workshops that took place in the West Midlands with our partner authorities and with the private sector. And I think anything that gives teeth to our planning arm and helps to improve decision making in planning terms, I think is hugely positive. So I'm quite happy to support this. It's a very important positive step forward.
Now I'm going to sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I think they're saying, Joyce, that you're sharing your screen with everybody, and you need, yeah, I think that's got us back to how we want to be, hasn't it? Right. So anybody from Cabinet wish to comment on this? No, it's all quiet. Right, so it's moved and seconded. I think I need to go through the members of the committee just to confirm that everyone's in favour. So if I go through one at a time, can you just say yes or no, or in favour? So can everyone hear all right? Yeah, yes. Everyone seems to be okay. Right, so Councillor Gwilym Butler?
Yes.
Councillor Lee Chapman?
Yes.
Councillor Steve Charmley?
Yes.
Councillor Dean Carroll?
Yes.
Councillor Steve Davenport?
Yes.
Councillor David Minery?
Yes.
Councillor Leslie Picton?
Yes.
Councillor Ed Potter?
Yes.
And I can confirm I'm in favour of this. So that's clearly unanimous. So thank you all. So we'll carry on with that, and that's the end of that item. So we move on now to item 9, which is the Q4 1920 Corporate Performance Report. And can I invite Councillor Lee Chapman, portfolio holder for Organisational Transformation and Digital Infrastructure, to explain the purpose of the item. Lee.
Yes, thank you, Leader. This is the Cabinet member with a long title.
Yes, I
thank you for that. And yes, so this report that I'm presenting today is a reflection on the information and the data that's available on the Council's online portal. There's a link to it at 1.4 on the papers presented today. you should all be aware that because of the timing of this quarter report and because of the COVID-19 pandemic that we are struggling and dealing with and have been dealing with since early March, it's had a significant impact on very significant proportion of these performance measures. There's a couple of items that I wanted to bring out. The healthy environment at item 5. It's unfortunate that I'm not in a position to congratulate my cabinet member for leisure services, who for the previous 3 quarters was performing very considerably above the previous year, and unfortunately the last quarter has seen all those gains disappear, as quite rightly with the COVID-19 restrictions these facilities have had to be closed. And I do think that from a strong backing from the public, we're clearly going to see recovery in this sector, potentially some of the last areas to come forward, but a significant performance nevertheless up until we were bracing ourselves with flooding in February. Moving on to 6.5, I'd just like to take the opportunity to highlight we are above our target for cycling and composting rate, and that although we are likely to see some impact of the closure of the household recycling centres, which I'm pleased to say have now reopened, I do think that this is an opportunity to thank those crews who have maintained curbside collections of waste throughout Shropshire for the whole of the period, and they are to be congratulated for their efforts. We've heard today in answers from questions posed by members and across a range of different subjects, discussions about the economy in Shropshire, and item 7 talks about a good place to do business. I think we're all well aware of the impact that the pandemic has had on our businesses in Shropshire, and although support from central government has been considerable, self-employed and for furloughing of staff, it's very clear that it will be some time before we see our economy recover. But you will have heard, and I would continue to emphasise our commitment at Shropshire Council to enable and to lobby and to support businesses and our communities in Shropshire to a recovery after this. Further on in the report, you will have seen at item 13 the talking here about the council and our work across Shropshire during the pandemic. We have, because of our investment in IT, been able to facilitate the majority of our staff to work remotely, and we have supported communities with community response teams, and we continue to work to rebuild our communities as the restrictions ease on the pandemic. But I don't propose to go into any more detail with any of these figures. I would just propose the recommendations at item 2 in the report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. I'm happy to second those. I've got Councillor Roger Evans wishes to speak. So Councillor Roger Evans.
Thank you, Peter. It's about item 7. Well, first of all, 1.4. It has been reported to IT, but when I've tried to use that link, I get access denied. IT, when they had a look at it this morning, was also getting the same. So been unable to gain access to that, and our Shropshire Council IT are looking into it, why that is taking place. But in the report itself, items 7 and 10, good places to do business and rural embrace our rurality. I think, Leader, you've also had a copy of a letter from a business who is saying that they are unable to access some grants because of Shropshire Council's policy of amalgamating all their small rural offices with their main office, which then puts them out of the categories that they could actually claim. And I think hopefully you will be looking into that to see whether that could be altered so that the small rural offices that we can maintain in there and help the businesses forward. And then my final comment is on 10.4, where it quotes about Department of Transport bid for better deal for buses. I assume that is still going into place, please. Thank you.
Right, if I respond on the rural businesses, I have had a number of queries about grants. They all are being dealt with. We're working through not a long list, but there's been a few queries about who qualifies and who doesn't. The one that you're referring to, I have discussed with officers this morning. I'm hoping to have an answer before the end of the day. It is being looked at and hopefully we can deal with that. As regards to buses, we are applying for all the various grants that are being announced by the government. I don't think we've had an exact response on electric buses yet, but I know we're involved in trying to get more cash for electric buses. We do see it as part of the future, particularly on some of the more urban services. It does work in the rural areas, but we're more cautious about long distances than we are about the shorter journeys. So I hope that's all right on those. So I will go back to Councillor Lee Chapman now. Lee, have you anything further to add?
No, other than to support the document. Thank you, Peter.
Right, so that's moved by Lee, seconded by myself. I will have to read out the names again just to make sure those in favour or who aren't in favour. So as I read your name out, can you say yes in favour or whatever? So Gwilym Butler first, Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Yes, in favour.
Councillor Lee Chapman.
Yes, in favour.
Councillor Steve Charmley.
Yep, support.
Councillor Dean Carroll.
Yes, in favour.
Councillor Steve Davenport.
Yes, in favour.
Councillor David Minery.
Yes, support.
Councillor Leslie Picton.
Yes, support.
Councillor Ed Potter.
Yes.
Yeah, and it has my support as well. So again, that's a unanimous decision that we support the report. So thank you for that. We now move to item 10, which is to exclude the press and public. And I need to propose that in accordance with the provisions of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 and paragraph 10.4 section 3 of the Council's access to procedure rules, the public and press be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items. And I'm going to ask Councillor Steve Charmley to second that.
Yeah, happy to second, Leader.
Right, so I'm just going to give it a minute or so for our tech experts to sort out how they deal with us going into private session. So if I do that.